Forests are terrifying. We all know the feeling. Despite being a place of beauty and stillness, the atmosphere can flip like a switch. Once our illusion of safety and comfort is broken, we realize how unwelcome we really are in their all-devouring landscapes. Hiking with a friend, you might not notice the skittering in the leaves to your left, or the branches creaking wildly 100 feet over your head. But once you're alone, something as simple as clearing your throat can feel like a beacon to the seemingly omniscient presence of the forest. Birdsong begins to sound mocking, the blowing of leaves like susurrated threats. It's almost as if we as a species have lost something, like we can't properly navigate or survive in that environment without tearing it down and building over top the stumps and sawdust. Or maybe we never had it to begin with. Watching The Witch, that's the one with 2 V's, this feeling of intense dread forms in your chest. You know it without the film having to tell you, the woods are a dangerous place to be. The setting in this movie is absolutely perfect. It makes the clearing that the family has built their homestead in appear like it's resting on a silver platter for the forces that lurk within the shadowy dead woods. From the outside, it looks green and lush, but once inside, the light becomes more grayish and the colors become faded and darker. I really enjoy the visual cues, showing how dreary and dismal it becomes once a character enters the forest. And in this movie, not a single good thing happens in there. It's terrifying to imagine yourself in those early settlers' shoes, depending on the forest to survive, but also keeping a safe distance. They were fearful of the forest even before they knew a witch stalked between the trees, just like we're fearful of the forest, even though we don't know what we should be afraid of. What's the difference between us now and the Puritan family shown in the film? We have cars and phones, probably a city or large enough town never too far out of reach, but take those things away. Your battery dies. You're lost in the forest. No way to know where your car is, the road, other people. Then it becomes clear how little we've changed. If we didn't have these distractions, these objects to cover our fears and pretend they don't exist, would we be forced to evolve? I love horror movies set in colonial America. The dark atmosphere of the forest just feels so enticing. It feels right to see the woods as this untamable force. Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow has one of my favorite settings in all of film. The western woods is as ominous in name as in appearance. Dead trees tangled together like a fortified wall, seeming to part only when it's the direction they want you to go. Leaves blanketing the ground, hiding roots, rocks, and mud for you to trip and fall. The woods seem to embrace you with open arms, and once you're inside, lock up tightly. And perhaps they could. Forests are alive and ever-changing. Who's to say that path you walked in on doesn't shift deeper into the brush while you're not looking? A cold morning in January, I got lost in the woods. Of course, I was hardly old enough to realize the severity of the situation or feel fear because of it. I'd wandered into the hilly tree line of my grandparents' property, which spread for acres and acres. It was almost valley-like, with tall reaching mountains peppered with boulders on either side. I still remember feeling like the trees guided you forward, deeper into their tangled branches. For a while, I pushed on, naivety fueling my clueless expedition. I remember snagging myself on a thorn bush, and though I was dressed for freezing New England weather, they still managed to pierce my skin and make me bleed. I felt vulnerable, exposed, alone. I stood there in the snow, in the silence, watching the clouds of my breath fade into nothing. One of the best representations of this shifting forest seeking to keep you until it's had its way is the unknown from Over the Garden Wall, a seemingly endless expanse of trees and fable-like locations designed to wear down and keep the 2 kid protagonists, Wirt and Greg, there forever. I felt a comforting horror watching this show. It reminded me of my own carefree days trotting amongst the trees, how easy it was to imagine friendly talking birds or dwarves that lived in the gnarls of thick tree trunks, how easy it was to believe every fairy tale you've ever heard was real, how easy it was to be lured in by the charm of the timber, pulled in further with no consideration of which way led back out. Unfortunately, quite a high number of Americans vanish into the wilderness each year, with many never resurfacing. Reports by David Paulides, and John Billman, each respective Missing 411 researchers, which is the unofficial term for such disappearances, both estimate approximately 1,600 people are lost without a trace each year in American national parks. According to StrangeOutdoors.com, Billman claims this number is likely wildly conservative. Disturbingly, the National Park Service and Department of the Interior are not required to keep track of or report all missing persons in the parks. But if you're curious to look at the search and rescue activity of the NPS, you can view interactive dashboards via the NPS ArcGIS. Though it says right below the map that this information only includes incidents that were reported, inferring that there could be many more that simply weren't reported. While we're on the subject of national parks and missing people, I want to mention what I think is the best no-sleep/creepypasta ever. Posted 9 years ago on r/no-sleep by u/search and rescue woods. I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. Definitely lit a fire inside me. It fed my desire to know what was out there. It brought up subjects like the stairs in the woods that really resonated with me. I've been a hiker my whole life, and I can certainly recall more than a couple of times seeing old stone stairs or a still standing brick chimney just out in the middle of the forest with no explanation. The first time I heard these stories, I listened to Corpse Husband narrate them on YouTube. I remember the buzzing I felt with each story. I was hanging off every word. We all know we have a fear of the forest. We just don't know why. These stories were my first introduction to why. As vague as some of them were, that just made it all the more believable. I can't help but feel like the woods have always been full of monsters and strange forces, and our instincts know that. The fear we feel alone in the trees, in the dark, it's more than just the fear of a bear or mountain lion. You can't tell me you don't get that eerie sense of dread if you let the thought creep into your mind. There had to be something more to the woods, and our bodies know it. I think a couple hundred years ago, when the United States was first getting settled, that's when we began wiping out the dangers. Maybe we flattened them with roads, built cities over them, hunted them with guns, and that's why these cryptids and unknowns only lurk quietly in the deepest, most isolated and untouched parts of the country. Standing in the woods, holding my scratched up hand, transfixed by the vibrant red seeping from my cut compared to the dull grays and whites of the forest around me, I was found. My grandpa led me back out of the woods and to their house up on the hill overlooking the trees. After that day, I was terrified of the woods. I only went out with Grandpa or my dad after that. Something about them felt watchful, intentional, ill-intended. Walking in those woods had me on guard. It felt like a trap waiting to be sprung. I've never felt that feeling so strongly in any other part of the country, or world even. European woods feel calm, gorgeous, and enchanting. I genuinely felt like I could pick any tree, lay my head down, and nap. Felt like I could stay there forever because I wanted to. American woods feel harsh and dark, a place I wouldn't want to sleep without a weapon close at hand and my back up against something solid. And I know other people feel the same. There's no shortage of memes comparing the lovely European woods against the terrifying American woods. Don't even get me started on forests in Asia, what with their innumerable spirits and lore-rich creatures. I'll be taking a trip to rural Southeast Asia in a few months, and I'll let you know how their forests feel after that. Okay, fine, we can talk about them a little. Everyone knows about the Okigahara forest in Japan because of a certain lunchly promoting, horrible, hat-wearing individual. Anyways, this forest, as I'm sure you all know, is very famous because of the amount of people who come there to end their lives. In traditional Japanese culture, someone who dies without the proper burial rites performed could very well return as a spirit called a eerie. According to yokai.com, eerie are capable of invoking powerful curses. They do not roam about, but haunt one particular place or person. In the case of a place, it is often where they died or are buried. Naturally, with the amount of people taking their own lives, lost in the tangles of trees, there could be many Yuri lurking within the dangerous Okigahara. As far as I can tell, Japanese people don't consider this to be a horrifying place, just one steeped in sadness, which I think holds equal weight. I wouldn't want to get lost in a dense, all-consuming place heavy with sorrow. Wait, I just described my room. Anyway, they made a horror movie about the Okigahara creatively named The Forest. It's not very good. The woods look pretty cool, but the jump scares are cheap and the CGI is pretty laughable for 2016. I just wanted to bring it up since it's so aptly named for the video, but my recommendation would probably be a pass. Don't hurt me if you like this movie. A great forest-related horror movie, on the other hand, would be this small little indie film that garnered a little bit of attention in certain communities. A quaint movie called The Blair Witch Project. I love the use of a 16mm film camera and the camcorder, as of course the many copycats did too, but unlike the last one, this movie is entirely about atmosphere over cheap horror, similar to The Witch. The brown dying woods become a hunting ground, with the protagonists slowly losing their minds as they're preternaturally guided deeper into the Black Hills forest.
Not possible in this country. Not possible. Because this is America and it's not possible. We've destroyed most of our natural resources. Let's just keep going.
God, shine your grace on thee!
I always love it in movies, and we touched on this a little in my Caves video about The Descent, but I always love it when the physical journey deeper into the hostile environment reflects the mental descent of the characters. It serves well to put the viewer into a state of unease. You expect to see something lurking in the shadows between the trunks, or a shape hiding amongst the leaves. I would say the backdrop of the West Maryland woods steals the show in this film. With an overbearing presence and an encapsulating dread, it's hard to deny the devouring nature of the fictional Black Hills forest. In fact, I would say many forests could be considered devouring. While exploring this idea, I actually found an entire subreddit based around trees, well, sucking on things. I like this one. While most of these are pretty funny, I can't help but feel a little grossed out at the same time. Nature doesn't care about you. It's ready to take its lands back and swallow us whole. I always thought that concept was explored pretty well in the beginning of the I Am Legend movie with The Slapper. Seeing New York overgrown like that just feels unique and almost satisfying. It's almost as if we have this sense that we as humans are temporary, that Mother Nature was here before us and more than likely it'll be here after us. We matter no more to the leaves, trees, and moss than the millions of other creatures that roam her lands. For me, this idea really stems from the A24 film The Green Knight, a gorgeous dark fantasy interpretation of the Arthurian story Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We get to watch Gawain venture deeper into the heart of the woods, similar to the journey from the Blair Witch Project, only this protagonist is much less willing to begin with. The strange demonic forest creature, aka the Green Knight, just strikes me as the Lorax if he was made for the real world and rated TV mature. The whole movie is just a return to nature. It shows the viewer it's better to submit to the green. We see flashes of Gawain lying dead on the forest floor like some kind of foreshadowing premonition. By the end of the film, we see that the better course of action is to welcome the idea that we're temporary and the green is forever. Actually, more and more, it seems like people in the modern day are doing just that.
No, I'm not talking about the increasingly lax marijuana laws.
The non-traditional burial method of the tree pod burial has been on the rise in recent years. I actually think it's a really cool idea, giving something back to the green. Better than it overtaking your gravestone in 50 years. But it may not be what you think. According to BetterPlaceForest.com, only the cremated remains of someone can be placed in the burial pod. The ashes are stored in a biodegradable urn, much to my dismay. A skeleton tree would be metal as fuck. There's one last personal story I want to leave you with. A couple of months ago, my buddy and I were talking and we realized we both wanted to shoot our guns. It had been a while for him and I just enjoy doing it and have access to some land that's perfect for it. So one Sunday, we loaded up the truck and headed out about an hour into the countryside. The roads got skinnier, the traffic sparser. We reached the chained pull-off, and after unlocking it, we drove through a cutout path through the dense underbrush and thick tree line. We followed the trail for a good ways until it rounded off like a lollipop at the end of a stick. We unloaded the gear, then unloaded some rounds into paper targets and fruit. After a while, we plopped into a couple of camping chairs, backs to the thick woods, sitting in the shade. We were in pretty deep, so the cars of the distant road weren't noticeable. But Then the unmistakable tone of an ambulance resonated over the undergrowth. Chatting idly, we didn't pay it much mind until from right behind us, in the thick tangle of twigs, came a wailing noise. It sounded like it was trying to copy the exact sound of the ambulance, and my buddy and I, we've talked about it a couple times since, and we both agree it sounded a lot like it. Our immediate reaction was looking at each other with primal fear in our eyes and running to the truck where we left the guns. My very first thought was it was a coyote or dog, but there's just no way. Whatever it was, it came so close to matching the exact sound of the siren, we both knew it was unnatural. We shot a couple more rounds after that and then decided to pack it in. I was gathering spent shells from the ground a good distance away from my buddy at the truck. I bent down right in front of a particularly thick and overgrown spot of woods, and something huge thudded from the tree line back deeper into the timber. I almost pooped. I tried to tell myself it was just a deer, but combined with that wail from earlier, I was just eager to get the heck out of there. I've always gotten a bad vibe on that land, even though I've been there countless times. Last time I went camping there, I heard incredibly weird moans coming from that same area of thick brush, just at 1:30 in the morning. I was solo camping, but man, I had my rifle close at hand all night. I felt drained and exhausted the next day, barely able to even move, dude. I remember setting up my hammock and just lying there almost all day. Like, normally I'm one for hiking and movement, so it was pretty weird. I couldn't even bring myself to stay another night. I had such an intense feeling of being watched as I cooked my dinner that I decided to just pack it up right then and there in the dark and leave. I know that's such a cliche, but I felt like I was under a spotlight, you know. I had my Bluetooth speaker going, I was listening to some music, had my fire going, I was cooking some food, and I don't know, I felt like 10 sets of eyes were on me. It was just really weird. I didn't like it at all. I wish I was joking or like lying because having land to camp on and use is amazing, but I just don't know if I want to face the dark energy in those woods. It feels heavy. And I hesitate to say the word evil, but it's far from a friendly feeling standing under the crown-shy canopy. Woods are terrifying, and depending on where they are, I think that's what makes the most difference. Perhaps what they say is true, and the European woods have been cleared of harmful spirits from centuries of warring, while large parts of the US woods remain somewhat untouched to this day. Or maybe as Americans, we naturally tend to have a more negative perspective on things, and perhaps the darkness in our forests is a reflection of that unintentional vehemence. Monsters might lurk within the trees, perhaps few in number, or perhaps none at all. Perhaps the woods are fighting back for all that we've taken from them, bending trees for our will and for our gain. Maybe it's trying to tell us we need to submit. We, as temporary beings, need to accept the all-encompassing, everlasting green. And into the forest I go to lose my mind and find my soul. Thanks for watching.